So, I know what you're thinking. Why did it take you this long to review this book? And the answer is because I only saw it at my bookstore recently, and that means that I've unfortunately spent 18 years of my life not aware of this book's existence. And regardless of whose fault it is, that's a darn shame. And I think this goes without saying, but there's gonna be some spoilers coming up because this is kind of an extensive video review. Okay, just to let you know. Anyway, so long story short, I was at the bookstore and there was a certain novel in the manga section that caught my eye. It was a book called I Want to Eat Your Pancreas.
I beg your pardon?
Alright, double take. I want to eat... Yeah, it literally says, I want to eat your pancreas. By Yoru Sumino. I didn't actually have cash on me when I found the book initially, so I actually had to go back to make the purchase. And it turns out the book was not in the same spot as it was last time. After searching for it and failing to find it again, I finally broke down and asked the employee. Hey, what's up, man? So this is gonna sound concerning, but do you have a copy of a book called, I want to eat your pancreas? Sorry, I can't hear you. Can you please speak up? I want to eat your pancreas? Come with me. So, right off the bat, the name of this book raises literally more than twice as many questions as there are words in the title. First of all, is it in first person because of the I? Is it the boy or the girl that's saying this? Or neither? Are they referring to the reader's pancreas? My pancreas? If so, is that a threat? Do you want to do this out of curiosity or do you have experience? If you have experience, why do you have experience? Did it taste good? Do certain pancreas taste different than other pancreas? Is the writer of this in jail? Do they still want to eat my pancreas? What the fuck? So today, we're going to attempt to answer all of those questions. And by we, I mean two other people. Myself and I. Okay, and I promise this is the last little tidbit before I get into the actual review, but after I bought the book, I noticed the sticker on the back of it with the barcode had the name of the book on it, but there weren't enough characters to work with, so it just says, I want to eat you. Okay, for real now, let's do this. Let's start with Chapter 0. Yep. Chapter 0. Oh, does this book really need a prologue? Alright, page 1. Oops! Someone's already dead. This isn't even a spoiler because it is quite literally the first 6 words of the book. The day of Yamauchi Sakura's funeral is dreary and cloudy, entirely at odds with the girl my classmate had been. Great! Not only will my pancreas be consumed, but I'm also going to cry. Good news though, the my in this first sentence actually does confirm that the book is in first person, so... We have that. So anyway, the narrator basically says that he just kind of skips this girl's funeral, even though she was like his closest friend. And it's just, I can kind of already tell where the story's going at this point. Like, the main character is this major introvert who just loves his peace and quiet. But he meets this super cute and exciting girl, and they fall in love because they find each other charming due to their polar opposite personalities, and the girl breaks him out of his shell, and it'll be a nice, wholesome love story, which for some godforsaken reason claims the title, I Want to Eat Your Pancreas. But yeah, the narrator gives off some sociopath vibes for sure. Kind of reminds me of the narrator from The Stranger. Speaking of the title though, it says that the last text message that was sent between them was him saying, I want to eat your pancreas. No, I still have questions. Chapter 1. I want to eat your pancreas, she said. Alright, she's saying it too. I guess it's mutual pancreas consumage. Hey, as long as it's consensual. But in all seriousness, basically what's happening with Sakura is that she has a terminal pancreatic disease. And she's been told that she only has a year, maybe even less, to live. And the phrase, I want to eat your pancreas, essentially comes from the superstitious idea that if you eat a certain body part, usually from an animal, but I don't judge, then your own corresponding body part gets better. So, for example, if you're having some classic Monday morning liver trouble, then if you eat a cow's liver, your liver will heal. It's actually kind of a cute superstition that brings a lot of charm to the story. And don't get me wrong, it's still slightly disturbing, but at least there's some kind of, tangible sentiment we can hold on to. So at this point, the mystery's solved. I know why the title is what the title is. So I could just stop here. But we have a freaking book to review. So there's something interesting that appears on page 12, and it's basically brackets that are designed to hide the narrator's name. This is a recurring device Sumino uses to reveal how everyone views the narrator. It's a very interesting writing tactic because, number one, it makes the narrator's real name a mystery, but more importantly, it opens up a ton of figurative options for later in the story that are admittedly nothing short of brilliant. You don't even know what a pancreas does, she teased. Sure I do. What? I wasn't Googling what a pancreas does. Also, I just want to point out, the narrator totally seems like the type of guy that just looks at a super long and emotionally vulnerable paragraph of text from his friend and just replies with, great. Like, Jesus Christ, this guy is so pragmatic, he doesn't even bother to spell out the word. The number 8 will suffice. And just to make a general observation of what I've observed so far, this guy is super good with symbolism, analogies, and just figurative language in general. I honestly have like 10 full pages of notes on this book, and for the first time, all those annotations weren't for high school and weren't against my will. Let's keep going, shall we? So already on page 17, we start to see the true nature of the effect Sakura has on the narrator. For now, we'll call him Jim. In other words, we start to see the true nature of Sakura's effect on Jim. I've been thinking about you. Is it really alright for you to be spending what little time you have organizing books in the school library? Now, the reason this is substantial is because for the first time, Jim is showing genuine interest and concern for someone. And unexpectedly, that someone isn't Jim. He cares more about Sakura than he does himself. And honestly, I kind of find that really adorable since this is, so early in the story. So her response to this just leads into another one of their beloved conversations full of banter and lighthearted teasing. And it kind of makes you think to yourself, wow, she's a little bit too okay with dying. Anyway, we'll come back to that later. My house and hers were in opposite directions, and this was where we always parted. I wished we didn't have to. Later, I said. I wasn't going to show my regret now. Oh my god, this guy is an actual tsundere. Okay, just real quick, I want to talk about this conversation Jim and Sakura have about morality. It's actually really interesting. So, Sakura basically brings up the point that Jim can't assume he'll outlive her because anything can happen, and he could die any day. And this is one of the few times in the early pages of this novel where Jim is agreeable and completely accepts this, even to the point of checking his pulse on the way home. I held my finger to my neck to make sure I was still alive. I mean, I don't know, dude. It's, you seem kind of like a robot. Chapter 2. Alright, so on page 24, we find out that Sakura actually keeps a journal called Living with Dying, which is basically the most crucial object of the story because, well, number one, we now know that she is indeed not a machine. And number two, it is literally the reason Jim and Sakura have the relationship they do in the first place. So what happens is, she leaves the journal on a bench in the hospital, and Jim comes to the hospital for a routine appendectomy. Jim comes to the hospital for an appendectomy. A once in a lifetime appendectomy. And he sees the journal, and his bibliophile instincts kick in, okay? So he impulsively picks it up and reads it, thus allowing him to find out about her secret pancreas disease, and okay, that's the big coincidence that kicks off the story. Anyways, usually not much bothers me, but looking back, I think that part of me didn't want to accept the possibility one of my peers had been doomed to an imminent death. Alright, good news. He's not a machine either. Neither of them are... You good? Okay, that's clear. By the way, Jim is like totally one of those people that's like super funny, but it's completely unintentional. So from pages 29 to 50, Jim and Sakura go on just the most adorable date of all time. And you start to see this on page 31, but it's interesting that Sakura seems to find beauty in ordinary things, whereas Jim focuses on fantastical things, which kind of seems ironic considering their respective lifestyles, but you could also say this happens because he reads a lot of romantic books, and she's accustomed to being social and being grounded in reality. Either way, it's pretty interesting. It also explains why she's so interested in Jim. Burn! And by the way, when I say romantic books, I don't mean like lovey-dovey, romance. I just mean the general writing style of romanticism. Okay, moving on. She grinned at me, though I didn't understand why. I rarely did. Oh, you naive little son of a gun. I'll tell you when you're older. And by older, I mean like next Tuesday, because you're 17 and... God, just please go outside once. I'm going to buy some rope. You heard me. Rope. Like for hanging yourself with. No. Stop. Is this gonna be like freaking Doki Doki Literature Club? I'm in the middle of recording something. The mall was packed with bustling crowds, but the store's rope aisle was empty. The only people looking to buy rope on a nice day like this were probably contractors, cowboys, and dying schoolgirls. This reminds me of when I went to get this book at my bookstore, but instead of suicide, the result was the best video on my channel. And just so everyone has peace of mind about this, she doesn't actually kill herself. She's just joking around about all this. She's using humor as a coping mechanism. Suicidal humor. I like fashion. Once I get to college, I'll dress up all the time. But I'll be dead before I make it to college. What's real on the inside is more important than appearances after all. Okay, I think you just broke my brain. So after the date ends, she sends this text to Jim. I thought I'd try texting you. I wonder if it'll go through. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Peace sign. I had so much fun. Smiling face. There's still more I want to do, so I want us to hang out again. Smiling face. Let's always get along till the day I die. Smiling face. See you tomorrow. How did I know she would use a million emojis? Chapter 3. Alright, let's start reading the next chapter. And oops, there's already murder. Why do you keep... So basically, someone was on the news for being senselessly murdered, which, believe it or not, will eventually be important in the story. But more importantly, gossip! Jim and Sakura are the talk of the school. And even more important than that, there was a missing period on page 54. Come on, Yorosumino! But I suppose it is acceptable, because he has blessed us with another scene of Jim and Sakura just hanging out from pages 60 to 77, and God, I just can't get enough of this adorable fluff. And just to let you know, all the moments with the cutest banter between Jim and Sakura are usually found around like page 1 to 287. Oh, speaking of, I'm just going to ask this because anything's possible, but did you know the person who got killed? She asked, do you think I did? Do you think I think you did? I replied. Alright, enough of that. Go on. I care about what happened, but I think most people just go about their lives not particularly interested in thinking about life and death. Sure, I said. You didn't answer the question! If there's one good thing about having to confront death, it's that I live each day knowing I'm alive. Wow. So on page 68, we're introduced to Sakura's best friend, Kyoko, who kind of seems like a tool at first, but she gets better eventually. It just takes a little bit. It takes a long time for her to become a bearable character. Also, Jim calls Sakura his companion. Ladies and gentlemen, we have made it to second base. That's what second base is, right? But yeah, Jim is like totally one of those people that just decides to be an English major because that's the least objectionable option. By the way, nothing against English majors, it's just, like, you gotta admit, it's kind of one of those majors that just is the best option for people who don't know what they want to do. Either that or business. Also, here's Sakura just experiencing the quickest mood changes you've ever seen here on page 72. First, it was a smile. Then she looked upset. Then a bittersweet grin. Then anger. Then sadness. Then upset again. Finally, she looked at me straight in the eye, smiled, and said, I'm dying. That is quite literally the 5 stages of grief in the matter of about 4 seconds. Uh-oh! Sakura basically asks Jim out on page 76. Let's see how our hero reacts. If I said I really did want another boyfriend, how far would you go to help me? She looked as if she was testing me, like she was trying to make her expression deeply meaningful. As for what that expression meant, or what her words meant, I was too unaccustomed to being around other people to know. How far would I go? Never mind, she said, shaking her head. It's alright. Wow, so it appears that Jim has failed to understand Just the most obvious confession of all time, which consequently makes us wonder why she even likes this dense piece of shit. Chapter 4. If there's anywhere you want to go before you die, we can go there. Wow, you just gave a completely blank check to Yamauchi Sakura. I take back what I said earlier, this guy has balls. So naturally, they get on a train to Fukuoka, and on page 90, Sakura falls asleep. For a long time, I looked to my side and saw her blissfully sleeping with the magazine against her stomach. I looked at her face in slumber and saw nothing of the illness that lurked inside. She didn't wake up before our bullet train reached our destination, and she didn't wake up once we got there either. I don't mean to suggest her short life had expired on the train that day. She simply was in a deep sleep. Please try not to jump to such an inauspicious conclusion. We finally passed through the exit turnstiles. In that moment, I experienced something that left me shaken and questioning my senses. Just as my companion had said, I could smell the ramen. Come on, again? I read somewhere that shrines weren't places for praying for a wish to be granted. The point was to declare one's determination to the god. But I wasn't determined to do anything at the moment. Or ever! So eventually this little girl comes up to them and asks if they're in love. And Sakura just says, we're getting along. So, what is that, like base 1.5? Here's the thing. I made this list of things I want to do before I die. And thus, the incredibly urgent form of the bucket list was born. Alright, page 101 is where it gets real. So this elderly woman trips and falls, and she spills some tea onto this other lady, and she loses her mind and shoves her to the ground. Sakura gets up and... Oh no, please don't be a shonen protagonist, please don't be a shonen protagonist, please don't be a shonen... So, she's gonna be a shonen protagonist and stand up for her. Well... 2 pieces of good news. Everything ended up fine. Sakura's not hurt. Also, Sumino managed to add a fight scene into a wholesome romance novel. Props. Now we're 2 people poking at the same hot pot. You mean like 2 people eating rice from the same pot? It's a step beyond that. I never shared a hot pot with my boyfriend. Her laugh was higher and louder than normal. That was because now she had alcohol running through her blood. You know, as drunk as she may be, she's right. They've officially made it to 2.4th base. Also, I would like to remind everyone that drunk words are sober thoughts. Food for thought. Speaking of that kind of food, it turns out there was a logistical problem at the hotel that they're staying at. And wouldn't you know it, Jim and Sakura are forced to stay in the same room. Of freaking course. And you could probably imagine Jim's reaction. Huh? I won't report the debate that followed, as I was already tired of those myself. Anyone could see where it was headed. She bulldozed me, and we ended up staying in the same room. And then she bulldozed me again. That wasn't in the book. That's just how, I just added a little joke there. Okay, I'm sorry about that. So on page 112, they get into the room, and she immediately offers him the option of sleeping with her in the bed. And then proceeds to go out into the balcony and say that their situation is romantic. And Jim just freaking starts watching TV. Oh, I'll just watch some TV, Just watch some TV. Please take a hint, dude. When did I get so invested in this book? Anyway, Sakura proceeds to take a bath on page 114. When the bathtub had filled, she disappeared happily into the bathroom. She foolishly admonished me. You better not peek. But I didn't even watch her walk out of the room. See, I was a gentleman. Great! That sounded vaguely arrogant. Oh yeah, I'm so much of a gentleman that I don't even make direct eye contact with women at all. Like, not even when they're speaking to me. I just ignore them. So they start playing Truth or Dare, and on page 124, she asks him how she ranks in terms of the attractiveness scale compared to the other girls he knows. And, that probably isn't a really big number, so this should be interesting. My answer is limited to the girls whose faces I remember, but you're number 3. Her cheeks were bright red. It was probably the alcohol. Yeah, it was probably the alcohol. You're right. It's probably the freaking alcohol. You shut up! I just no, I knew that to me. So in the version of Truth or Dare that Jim and Sakura are playing, they have to draw cards, and in the final round, Sakura draws a 7 and Jim draws a 6. And that has potential to be symbolic of God and the devil. Am I going too far in my analysis of this innocent romance novel? I think I might be going too far in my analysis of this innocent romance novel. Ladies and gentlemen, on page 131, we finally find out the truth about how Sakura has been, well, living with dying. Let's take a look. She took in a single deep breath and then asked that night's last question. If I... Her voice was soft and her words caught. I waited. If I told you I was actually terrified of dying, what would you do? I turned to her. Her voice had been so faint, I nearly got the chills. To avoid facing that feeling, I faced her instead. I needed to see if she was still alive. My heart just melted. And on that note, let's jump over to page 136 for some better news. Oh, you may have heard, but apparently Kyoko's going to kill you. If I do anything funny to you, you mean? I reminded her. Yeah, I guess Kyoko's alright after all. And good thing, because she's actually a really important plot device later on in the story. And no, I'm not saying she's an object, I'm saying she's a tool for the story. Jesus Christ, am I gonna have to have a disclaimer for everything? I'm not saying she's a tool either! What do you mean you saw my wink? It was so subtle. Okay, well let me see your wink, you little plot device. Chapter 5. Breaking news! On page 145, Jim No First Name Given has allegedly confirmed that he has an A in his name. Hey, controversial classmate, he said, drawing out the A at the end of my name. We will be back shortly to discuss how this affects the very nature of our society. After a brief message from our sponsor, Ultimate Battle Fight Ultra Game. Take it away, guys. The RPG landscape has never been more impacted by such a masterpiece since the likes of Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Chrono Trigger. Introducing Final Chrono Quest. Just kidding. Introducing Ultimate Battle Fight Ultra Game. Feast your eyes on this RPG fantasy TCG sci-fi MMO strategy game. 874 weapons, 39,418 playable characters, 6 distinct personalities. Available on Steam. So, speaking of ultimate fighting games, Jim and Sakura start playing one at her house on page 157. And out of nowhere, she asks if he's into her. And guess what, ladies and gentle flirks? He says nah. Just nah. Yes, you are! You're into her if I say you're into her! So she literally pins him against a wall and calls him question mark, Kun. Wait. Is his name Silver? No, there's no A at the end of that. But there is if you say it in a Japanese accent. So anyway, he just continues to secure his head squarely up his own ass and refuses to understand anything just remotely related to physical intimacy. So Sakura has no choice but to back off and say it was just a joke and this is the last straw. In fact, Jim actually gets irritated at her for doing this. If this was what associating with other people was like, then I had been right to never want to socialize with anyone. They could all get a pancreatic disease and die for all I cared. Then I had an even better idea. I would eat all their pancreases! That's the spirit! Also, we finally got an answer to the long-awaited question. The plural of pancreas is pancreases. But I refuse to accept that because pancreas sounds cooler, so I'm just going to use that whenever I need the plural version of pancreas. And honestly, I kind of hope I don't. Anyway, the climax of the story takes place from around pages 171 to 178 or so. And I really don't want to spoil the story for you because I know for a fact that you haven't read this modern classic of a novel. Chapter 6. Oh, Jim, we're receiving another update about Jim's name. Thanks, Jim, that's interesting. Yeah, okay. Let's see, let's turn it over to Jim and see what he says. Thanks, Jim. Yes, on page 195 right here, it is confirmed that Jim's name includes the Japanese characters for death and spring tree. That's all we know so far. Okay, but isn't there, like, anyone that we could contact that speaks Japanese? You know, seeing as how we're a multi-million-dollar news corporation? I'm afraid not, sir. Like, just anyone in Japan. Yeah, I'm getting a message from our regional supervisor that our audience needs to read the book for themselves to find out his name because it's revealed at the end. To know someone, to get to like someone, to get to dislike someone, to enjoy being with someone, to hate being with someone, to hold hands with someone, to hug someone, to pass someone by. That's what it means to live. When you're all on your own, you don't know who you are. The people I like and dislike are who I am. The people I enjoy being with and the people I hate being with are who I am. Those connections are mine. They define my life as uniquely mine. I know I have feelings because of everyone around me. I know I have a body because other people can touch me. Those connections give me shape. I am alive here. I am alive now. That's what it means for someone to live. Just as you and I have chosen to be alive here and now. And that's how I know how all this isn't just one big fever dream, even though I really frickin' wish it were sometimes. Listening to her speech, I had discovered a genuine feeling building up inside my deepest depths. Once I recognized the feeling, I could see it had been right under my nose and nearly all-encompassing, and yet, due to my cowardice, I had failed to notice it before. Yes, Jim, it's called emotion. Chapter 7. So let's start off the chapter with a cute moment from page 215, because God knows we're gonna have to cling on to any happiness we can find for the end of this story. She said, "When I die, you'd better eat my pancreas. What if I just ate the bad parts? Would you keep living then? Maybe I should go ahead and eat your pancreas for you now. You want me to keep living? Very much." I was glad my humor was dry enough that I could speak the truth and have it come across as a joke. You know, they say if you like something ironically for a long enough amount of time, you'll start to love it unironically. Something to think about. So Jim and Sakura continue to talk, and they start discussing when they want to see each other again. "So you don't want to see me?" "I don't not want to see you." You know, if you think about it, literally all of this guy's decisions could be considered to be the result of a pathetic double negative like this one. Outside, people passed by each other in the bright daylight. A man looked like he was overheating in his hot suit. Why didn't he take off his jacket? A young woman in a tank top trotted toward the train station. Was she off to do something fun? A high school-aged boy and girl walked off together, holding hands. A couple. A mother pushed her baby along in a stroller, and I noticed what I was doing, and I was taken aback. The people outside were strangers. I would likely never have any connection to them for the rest of my life. If they were strangers, why was I thinking about them? I wouldn't have done that before. I thought I had no interest in the people around me, or rather, I had decided not to take interest in any of them. I chuckled to myself. Had I changed this much? I was enjoying this, and I laughed again. I pictured the face of the girl I was waiting to join me. She had changed me. She'd changed me, and I knew it. The day we met, not when we got put in the same class in school, but when we actually met, I was put on a path of change in who I was, in the course of my life would take, and in the views on life and death. You could honestly show this quote alone to someone and perfectly describe this book's meaning through that by itself. And again, I had that thought. You teach me so much that my phone vibrated in my pocket. Was it really your phone? I'm ashamed. So Jim is waiting for Sakura at the same cafe they went to earlier, and he decided to text her something wholesome, but can't decide what. He then has a revelation. As I thought it over once more, the words came to me from a corner of my memory. Or maybe the center of it. I felt elation at finding those words, along with more than a little pride. There was no better message to center than this. Nothing else so perfectly summed up my being. I want to eat your pancreas. You did it, Yoru Sumino! You made the phrase, "I want to eat your pancreas," sound sweet. Give this guy a Nobel Prize! On a more serious note, something happens on page 228 that is genuinely heart-stopping. Not only is it heart-stopping, but it's brilliantly symbolic. I was still in shock for like an hour after I read it, and I can't take that experience away from you guys. You need to experience it on your own, or else this heartbreaking story won't have as much impact. In fact, that also goes for the rest of the story, and all of chapter 8. The rest of the book is really something to admire, and it's honestly really tear-jerking. It's definitely not what I expected when I picked up this charming little find at Books A Million, but I can't say I regret any of it. It's really all been a fantastic treat, and I hope you all give it a chance. I promise it's worth it, especially since I'm notorious for hating to read, and I enjoyed every second of it. So, with that, the story of I Want to Eat Your Pancreas comes to an end. And so does this godforsaken video. Best wishes.